Oh, hi. I'm Travis Whitmire, and welcome to another lesson in our beginning guitar phase one. And in this section of getting started, we have been going over some of the very fundamentals of information. What do we call this? What is the line? What is that dot? I want to talk about the musical alphabet today. And the musical alphabet is important to know because this is how we spell everything out. We are forever and ever most likely going to be referring to strings, notes, etc. By their term in the musical alphabet. We're not going to play this and say, "Hey, play that kitty cat note." Now, I mean, you can, but then you're going to have to teach everyone what kitty cat means. Fortunately for us, there's already a standardized way of being able to notate and be able to arrange or collect these groups of notes to basically go from here to here and give them all a name. So as opposed to going kitty, cat, goldfish, little dog, pony, horse, red, blue, apple, orange, that's not what we're going to do because it doesn't make any sense to most people. However, we can have our own little method. That's later on. For right now, let's let's start with some of the very most basic of basics. The musical alphabet goes from A to G. We have accidentals in between these natural notes. These accidentals are called sharps and flats. Now, these accidentals can be an expression of one note written two different ways, and every sharp can be a flat, and every flat can be a sharp. This is called an enharmonic equivalent. More on that in a second. We have steps, just like we go up a ladder or upstairs, and our steps for our musical alphabet are in half steps from one note to the next. So every half step we take from one note to the next is climbing up the musical ladder. And our guitar, our musical ladder, can start at our lowest note. It can start. It doesn't really matter. We have an A to a G, and wherever we find ourselves in the what note is that? Okay, well we go up, and we're raising a pitch. We're gonna raise that, and we can call that a sharp. If we go down, lower that, that can be a flat. So let's go through the musical alphabet. Um, and again, this is not meant to be an end all be all of understanding of all music theory. This is a cursory view of what do we call that note. So for us, as we went over the names of our strings, we have every good boy. I'm sorry. What do we have? Every angry dog goes barking everywhere. Let's start with our A string right here, our fifth string. So appropriately enough, on our guitar with that A string, we're gonna climb up the musical ladder and see where it takes us. So you remember I said we go up, we're raising something, well, with sharp. So we're gonna go up the musical ladder with sharps, and we're gonna go down the musical ladder with something different, and I'll tell you about that in a second. A, open string A. The next note up, we're gonna raise that, and we go up a half a step, we have an A sharp. We go up again to a, well, let's just keep going up the alphabet like we normally would. We don't have to think about that too much. Sidebar over here. There's two places we exclude the accidentals. In between the notes B and C, and in between the notes E and F. Now, why is that? Well, if we look at the keyboard here as a visual, we see we have groups of 2 and groups of 3 in black. So if we just think of this keyboard as being a more visual explanation of how we can understand the musical alphabet, then we can see that when we go along these white keys, all the way along we have the natural notes, and that's our A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So if we start right here on the note A on our guitar, and that's also right here on the keyboard, A, we see that our next half step up, if we climb the musical ladder, we have to, every time we go to the next white note, we have to go through the black note. Let's think of it that way. I think of it climbing up the ladder. Well, A, up half a step, we're going to get to a black note. We're going to hit an A sharp. Now, we go to the next note. It's going to be a white one, right? On the keyboard, on the guitar. Same note. Doesn't matter what instrument we play. Anything that sounds like this, at that pitch, that's a B. Now, what do we see next? We see that on the keyboard, between these two white keys, there's no black. that means there's no accidentals. And that's the explanation as far as why, as we're spelling out the musical alphabet, we don't have an accidental between the notes B and C. And again, as we look at the notes going up the guitar or up the keyboard, we see there's one more place where we have the same occurrence. And as far as how and why, I want to save that for another lesson and just jump through these the musical alphabet so we at least understand what it is. And as far as why, we can touch base on that at a later point. But we've made it up to the note C now from B. So if we keep going up in these sharps, we gotta keep going up our musical ladder. And every time we gotta jump over a black key, we gotta give that a name because it's an accident. So we go from C, we go up half step to C sharp. I'm gonna fly through the rest of these real quick, so that way we don't spend too much time. But we have C sharp to D, our next note up, D sharp, E. Here's the other occurrence where we don't have any accidentals. E to F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. We're back to where we started. What do we call that? You can remember from another lesson. If you jumped ahead, then we talked about the octave, and that is basically going from one pitch or one note up to this next note up the musical alphabet where we end and would start over again. This is the easiest way to think of it for me, is where we would get to the end and have to start over again. So we've gone to A. Let's jump back down in musical alphabet and talk about the flats now. So if we go A and we're starting to let the air out of our tires and get flat, we go from A to A flat, G, G flat. Now you're asking yourself, hey, when we went up, that was called an F sharp. Why are we calling it a G flat? Well, if we look at the keyboard, we hit that note or we see that note, what we call it doesn't really change the way it sounds. That's the enharmonic equivalent. So just know that, as I said, there's two ways to spell all of these accidentals. Well, without getting too complex here, let's just say when we're flattening something, going down, we give it another name for now. Yeah. So we're at F sharp, F. Now again, here, remember, between the E and F, no accidentals. E to F, E flat, D, D flat, C. Again, no enharmonic equivalent, no accidental in here between B and C. E flat, back to A again. So those are all of the notes on the A string. And if we go back and reference tuning our guitar, remember we had E, A, D, G, B, E. Well, if we go from A, check this out. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. Guess what? Next note, D. So we can now plot out the notes on all of our strings, and I encourage all of you to go through on the first 5 frets of your guitar and name all of these notes. I want you to go through and start on the lowest note, and when you climb up the musical alphabet, keep this in mind. A through G, sharps going up, flats going down, no sharps or flats between B and C and E and F. Okay? Keep that in mind. Go through, name the notes of these as you go up the string. And you don't have to spend hours and hours on it, but just be able to go E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. Get to the 5th fret, go to the next string. You're gonna find there's a little occurrence here that's gonna repeat itself, and you're gonna have one of those moments. So send me your questions in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. But for now, that's going to take us along as far as we need to be on our musical journey, understanding the musical alphabet. Be much more to come. Sounds the same. What do we call that? That's for you to explore, and we will continue on with this in another lesson. So, as always, see you later, alligator, in a while, crocodile, and crazy chord. Oh, how about slash chord? Not from Guns N' Roses, but we're gonna have the C over B flat. That's not too crazy. How about this one? A little crazy. Hi, I'm Travis Whitmire, and welcome to another lesson in our beginning guitar phase one. And in our getting started section one, we've been going over some of the terminology, the parts, things we need to know to be able to know more. So I've been kind of flying through some of these topics, uh, saving some time for us to dive into some of the more, let's say, the fun stuff, the juicy stuff. We're going to always be adding on these terms and always be building on our musical education, whether it's musical theory and other terms. But for right now, I want to give you a understanding of musical alphabet in under 5 minutes. So here we go. We have a musical alphabet that lays out the same as our traditional alphabet. The only difference is we cut it off at the letter G. So between all of these now musical notes, or these names for these notes between A and G, we have what's called accidentals. So as we climb up the musical ladder in half steps, as laid out on a guitar, as laid out on a piano, this is the smallest increment between two notes that we traditionally recognize in Western music. So we start with A, and we're going to go up in pitch. We're going to call that a sharp. So our sharps are accidentals between our musical alphabet, and as we're going up in pitch, we're going to name these as sharps, and when we go back down in pitch, we're going to lower these notes and we're going to give them flats. Something to keep in mind here is that as we go up in pitch, we're going to give it a name. When we're going back down in pitch, well, we're going to hear the same note. So what that means is we have two different ways to write the same sound or the same note. Another thing I've mentioned here is this little phenomenon of accidentals and the enharmonic equivalents, as we call them, two spellings for the same note. This does not happen between notes B and C and E and F. So I'm going to give a more detailed description below, but for now, just know that we start off on A, and we're going to climb up the musical ladder, and I'm going to jump through this pretty quick here, but it's all written out, and again, now have an understanding of the how the musical alphabet lays out on guitar. A, we raise up to an A sharp. We go up half a step. We have that accidental in there, A sharp. B. Now here's where I had told you about the exception between notes B and C. We have no accidental. We go to C, we raise that up, get lifted up a little bit. Give me some love from the C to the there we are, C sharp. Doesn't matter how we play it or where we play it. A C is a C, a D is a D. We're at our D. We raise that up to a D sharp. We raise that up to an E. Now from B to C and E to F, no accidentals. So we go straight from E up to our friend Mr. F. F to F sharp to G, G sharp. Next, and finally we're back at A again. You'll notice that we ended up here on A. We started on A. An octave. Two notes. You notice that it's higher in pitch. It's the same notes. So if we go back down from our A, we're going to lower. Now we're going to get our flats again. So pay attention to where we land on these notes, where before we might have called them something different. It's going to be the enharmonic equivalent. A, we lower that to A flat. A, we're going to have our A flat down to G. G to G flat. We call that an F sharp when we're going up. G flat. F, remember, no accidentals between E and F, so that holds true for going down. E to F, E to F, F to E, E flat, same as a D sharp, right? So now we have E, E flat, D, D flat, lower that D to a C. Now from our C to a B, no enharmonic equivalents, no accidentals, nothing. You just go straight to B. Do not collect your $200 for all you Monopoly fans. D, lower that down to B flat. B flat, lowers down to A. We're back where we started again. That is the musical alphabet in under 5 minutes. Sharps, flats, sharps raise, flats lower, A, G, two notes in written form to express one note as it sounds. It's an enharmonic equivalent. No accidentals between B and C and E and F. There we go. What I want you to do is I want you to start under A. I want you to go up to the 5th fret, and then I want you to jump to the next string and do it again, saying the names of the notes. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, go to the next string, which just so happens to be what? A D. Right? I want you to go and start on the note D and go up using the sharps. C, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G. Go to the next string. Do it again. We're going to talk about tuning a guitar. And before we talk about tuning a guitar, going through this exercise is going to really help us being able to take that tuning guitar lesson and understand that really quickly. So I want you to go through and do like I just did on all 6 of your strings, naming the sharps, go back down, naming the flats, and join me on the next lesson. Until then, in a while, crocodile. See you later, alligator. And crazy chord. Ready? Here we go. Oh, I love this one. Aloha. Hi, I'm Travis Whitmire. Welcome to another lesson in our beginning guitar phase 1. And in this section 1, we've been going over the things we need in getting started, which is why we named it Getting Started. We've touched on what do we call these lines, these dots, what do we call these parts? Well, there's one more thing we need to talk about right now, and many more things down the road. But today we're going to discuss the musical alphabet, and this is a really short version. I could talk about this for like anything for hours, but I'm talking about the musical alphabet in its most condensed form ever. So if you want to have the longer version, check out the long version for short. Here we go. Ready? I'm going to talk fast. I'm going to give it to you all in one little explanation. We have a musical alphabet starting A, it goes to G. We have accidentals in between these notes, A and G. These are sharps and flats. Now, there's 2 ways to name each note. We can have what's called an interharmonic equivalent. When we go up in pitch, we're going up the musical alphabet. We're going to call it a sharp. A sharp to B. We go in half-step increments between all of our musical alphabet. And in this series of half-step increments, we have going up sharps, going down flat. So A sharp, B, we go down from B, we got B flat. We have an A sharp and a B flat. They're about the same, sound the same. No one's gonna really be able to tell the difference by hearing it. However, that being said, they can be spelt in 2 different ways. We have 2 places where this occurrence of enharmonic equivalents or accidentals do not take place. That is between the notes B and C, E and F. All right, so as we go up in half steps from A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, right? Then we're gonna go back down. A flat, G, G flat, F, E flat, D, D flat, C, B, B flat, A. There it is. The most expedited explanation of the musical alphabet. Hope you enjoyed that. As always, see you later, alligator and wild crocodile. And crazy chord. How about this one? Aloha. Hi, I'm Travis Whitmire, and welcome to another lesson in our beginning guitar phase 1. And in this section 1 of getting started, we've been going over some of the fundamentals, the basics, the things that we need to know to get to know a little more. So, we have wanted to wrap our minds around what do we call this and that. What are the names and the parts of the guitar? What are the strings named? We talked about chord diagrams and tablature, standard notation. We need to discuss one other important thing right now and able to go forward a little bit more. and that is the musical alphabet. So while this can be a topic that goes on and on and on and have a very long explanation, I want to keep things simple and just give you an overview. And I will say this, that as we go through more and more, we're going to be able to enrich our understanding, and everything that we're learning is going to culminate and come together in this big musical ball of knowledge or information. So we don't have to know everything about everything all at once. And like I said, it all starts to gel after a while if we just stay with it. So the simplistic or the cursory view of the musical alphabet, so to speak, will go like this. Ready? We're going to start with the letters that we use in our musical alphabet. So we're going to go from A over here. There's an A. We'll use that one. All the way up to the note G. And with that in mind, we're going to have, just as we go from one note to the next on guitar or the piano or pretty much every instrument in the Western musical world here, we go in half steps. So a half step is the smallest distance in between the notes that we generally recognize commonly. Now, that's not to say that there's not other notes, there's microtones, but as far as how we generally perceive music in our Western way, we have these half steps. So between every one of these musical notes, we have a half step. And this half step space between these musical notes, let's take, for example, A to B. We're going to have, in this half step, what's called an accidental. Now, these accidentals are the notes that take place between the natural notes that we see in our musical alphabet. So a couple of things that I want to have you keep in mind here is that we have accidentals between all of our notes in the musical alphabet, with the exception between the notes B and C and the notes E and F. Now, this can be further demonstrated on a keyboard, which uses all black and white notes. So it's really easy to see this keyboard and to see as we look at these white notes and we then are able to say that these are the natural notes and the black notes, those are the accidentals. And we can make reference, and as we follow along here on the guitar, we can see that it makes some sense when we apply it in a black and white, literal black and white understanding. So as we talked about going from our open note A to going to B, we have this half step in between. Well, we can't call that a almost B or a more than A. We're gonna give, every time we raise or go up in pitch, we're going to be giving that a little bit of a sharpening or raising. So when we raise, it's sharp. And just know that as we have these accidentals, that there's a couple ways to refer to what we hear as the same note, and that's really a discussion for another day. But I will tell you this, that for understanding in a simplistic way, when we're raising, we're sharpening, and when we're lowering, like lowering that air in a tire, we're flattening. So we go from A up to our next half step up. We're gonna sharp, or we're gonna raise that A to an A sharp, and then we go to a B. And as I mentioned before, between those B and C, as we see on the keyboard, as I've laid all of these notes out, and we see that between the notes B and C, there's no black keys, there's no accidentals. We don't have to give any other additional name there. So when we go from our B to C, we just climb right up to Mr. C there. Oh, I love that C. Now we're gonna keep going and work our way up to a C sharp. The next note up, we go up to a D. This is a lovely D. And it really doesn't matter where we play a D. It's always a D, right? So our D is going to be raised to a D sharp. D sharp goes to E. Now again, between the E and F, no accidentals. We're going to go straight from our E to our F. F sharp, up a half step. F sharp to G. G sharp is going to be next. And then finally we're going to cycle around as we go on our musical alphabet from A to G. We turn around again. We just keep going and going, and that's it. One way or the other, A to G, we end up at A again. So we've made it all the way up from our A up to an A again, 12 notes up using sharps. If we go back down, we're going to lower these notes. We're going to then go from A down to, we're going to lower that to an A flat. Now, right here, we're going to recognize that as we went up, we called that something else. We called it a G sharp. So what that means is, as I mentioned before, two ways to express one sound and express writtenly. So uh, we have this A flat or G sharp. That's called an enharmonic equivalent. Whenever we have an accidental, is always going to have an enharmonic equivalent, which means if we're going up and we're raising it, for instance, from G to G sharp, or we're going down in the musical alphabet, say from A to A flat, well, G sharp and A flat sounds the same. You're not going to be able to differentiate by hearing it, but when we're writing it, there's reasons for this later on we'll get to, but just for right now, know that as we go down from our A to our A flat, we land a G, G flat, which of course is going to be an F sharp, then down again to an F. And remember, between E and F, or F and E, as we're going down, no accidentals. So F to E, we go down to an E flat, which of course in harmonic equivalent is going to be a D sharp. Then we have our D to our D flat, which in harmonic equivalent will be C sharp. So then we go down to our C. Now remember, no accidentals between B and C, or C and B. No matter if you're going up or down, the musical alphabet is round and round, round and round, round and round. We're going to take our B, we're going to lower the air in our little musical tire there to B flat, and that's going to take us back to where we started, which B flat in harmonic equivalent, A sharp, takes us back to our open A. So what we're going to note here is that as we start on our open A, we climb up the musical alphabet to our 5th fret, we're going to notice that as we go from an A sharp, B, C, C sharp to a D on the 5th fret of this A string, our next string over is a D. So this is important because we're going to continue this in another lesson where we talk about tuning the guitar. So just know that even with needing to tune the guitar, having an understanding of the musical alphabet helps us out there. So I hope you enjoyed this very brief explanation of the musical alphabet. And again, as I mentioned, we could go on and on about this, but you're going to pick it up as we go. So for right now, if you have any questions or comments, something that I didn't address, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to see you later, alligator, in a while, crocodile, and we're going to crazy chord on out of here with, ooh, how about this one?